And last week, I talked about perspective. I talked about our heart health and our perspective, and we used the verse Psalm 24:1. And so Psalm 24:1 basically says that God owns it all. And that's the one key perspective at the center that we need to have in mind. God owns it all. What if you really believed that God was the owner and the provider? That's it. He's the owner and he's the provider. You know what? You would have more confidence in the way you use money. You would have more peace and you would have more freedom. If your owner is the biggest guy in the universe and your provider can write the biggest checks, it would take the burden off of our limited perspective, because we would be learning to trust God and his wisdom, and that's how we begin to experience life transformation. So somebody wrote me this week who's not in Uruguay, and they said, John, I want to tell you because you've been my pastor, but I've been in my job now for years. And he said, I'm really thinking about leaving my job and doing something, finding something to work to meet the needs of these people in this country where I am. And I said, wow, God will show you the path, but it's a bold step of faith. How do you trust God for your finances when you think you already have it figured out? So we're going to make some practical things this morning. And my goal is that at the end of today, you're going to be able to know. So when you go home for lunch, you can tell somebody, man, you wouldn't believe what we talked about money in church today. And there are only 4 possible uses. And you can get your piece of paper and show them right there. So you don't have to remember all the details. You can make your own illustrations. You don't have to memorize the Bible verses. I'll tell you some, and you can write it down. You can look it up. But you're going to know there's only 4 things that you can use for your money. There's only 4. So you're going to know them today. And there are 5 habits that work for everybody, everywhere, that are going to help you move ahead. And then next week, we're going to talk about how to build and increase margin. So I don't have any margin. I can't do this. I don't have anything extra. I don't have any place to give, to change my situation. Well, it all begins with this. It's making that decision, that commitment of faith to say, you know what? I am going to believe that God is my provider. Everything that I have comes from him, and I am an administrator. The more money that people have, the more convinced they tend to be that they've made it themselves. They've organized it, they've figured it out, and so many of us want to believe that I have worked hard, I have earned this, I deserve this, God has blessed me, or that's what a religious person says. A non-religious person says, I did this. And so it's tough to break that. Even to say, God blessed me because I'm a really good person is just another way of saying, I did this. God has to bless me because I did the right thing. God doesn't have to do anything for you. That's part of being God. And so it's letting go and saying, God owns it. He's the owner. And sometimes the owner does things we don't understand, or he doesn't provide for everything we want. Do you give to everybody who asks something from you? Do you give your kids or your parents or your friends anytime they say, oh, I'm hungry, I wish I could have a cheeseburger? Oh, yeah, I have to. And we kind of want God to be like that for us. But let's go on. 4 possible uses. Here they are. It's really easy. You can live, give, owe, or grow. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, but live, give, owe, grow. Just try that. Live, give, owe, grow. Let me hear you say that. give, o grow. Live, give, o grow. So if you're in Spanish, vivir, dar, deber, crecer. Vivir, dar, deber, crecer. ¿Lo pueden decir en español? Vivir, dar, deber, crecer. You know what? That pie, that's a circle is a pie. Every bit of money that you have right now fits in one of those categories. Everything you have. There's nothing else you can do with money. You use it to live. You use it to give. Live is the money you live on. Give is the money you give away. Owe is the money you owe other people. You owe it in taxes or you owe it in some form of debt. And grow is some kind of investments or money that's working for you that's increasing, like a savings plan or an investment. Now, you can make it as complicated as you want, and you can argue with people about what thing goes in which category, but there aren't any other categories. There really aren't. It's really that simple. And if you want your pie of living to be bigger, some other piece of the pie has to be smaller. So just look at that. It's just like, it's that simple. If you want to give more, something else has to be smaller. And that's the story of finance. Live, give, owe, and grow. And most people are living and not giving, and they're owing and not growing. And most people wish that they had more to give, and they wish they had money that was growing. And so we've got to look at that. But the first thing is knowing what those things are. You know, that makes it super easy to work on your own budget. I'm surprised so many people don't have a budget. But I confessed to you last week, I wasn't very good at budgeting until I married Lisa. And so she manages the budget. And so any success we make, I have to give her most of the credit there. But live, give, owe, grow. That's a simple budget. That's the kind of thing I'll show you how to do if you come in the workshop. You'll do it for yourself. You can take all the money that you have. It can be a lot. It can be a little. And you can make those categories. And I say there's 4, and you're saying, but that's 5. Well, because we split owe into 2 things. What are your taxes? They're just taken from you, and you owe it. And what are the debts that you can call it a debt or an investment, and you can argue about that. If your house is an investment, if your house is a debt, and you put it in the category where you want it, but it all goes in those categories. Okay? So live. Money is a tool. And there's some Bible verses up there, and I'm just gonna show you the basics so you can later, it'll all be on the screen. You can take a picture and you can look up the Bible references. But money is so hard for people to talk about, and it's the cause of so much conflict and stress in our life that I just want to make sure that you remember the basic framework, and then you have the rest of your life to work on it. But money is a tool. There can always be more money. I was working on the board of a place that had a big budget, and we had a problem, and we had to fire somebody. And it was an important somebody in the organization, and we had a consultant who knew a lot more than the rest of us on the board. And so knowing more usually means you have experience. And you have experience because you make a bad decision, and then you can learn from that. We don't always learn from it. Sometimes I make a bad decision, and then I'm scared, and so I don't want to ever make that kind of decision again. But if we learn from it, then we go along. And so somebody who frequently does a certain type of decision or a certain kind of work has more experience. So we brought in somebody with a lot of experience. He said something I had never heard before. He said, okay, so you're going to fire this person, and it's all complicated, and you're scared, and the people are like, what do we do? And he said, let me tell you something. How much is it going to cost you? So we look at the treasurer, and the treasurer said, if we fire this person, it's going to cost us this much money. And he said, and what else? Well, we have to find somebody else. He said, you know what? If all it costs you is money, it's cheap. If all it costs you is money, it's cheap. It's cheap. And I said, I was thinking about that, and I'm still thinking about that. But there's so many things in our life, we're ready to have a conflict or a fight or some terrible trauma in our life or our marriage or relationship. And sometimes all it is some money. And you can make more money. And money's just money. It's not that big of a deal. And so you think about that. Maybe don't grasp it all right now, but money is just a tool. And so it doesn't need to be the thing that breaks up your relationship or your communication or your peace. And so money's a tool. So live everything you're using to live on. Everything that you say, hey, my groceries, my, the bus, you can figure out what you put in that category, but it's what it costs me to live. So give. Giving, the scriptures talk a lot about giving. So if I say God owns it all, and that's my perspective, then that means I'm an administrator, and if he asks me to give money, just let it go. It's his money. If he wants me to have a little or to have a lot, it's interesting. The Bible talks a lot about sometimes in the little things, we're not faithful. We don't manage a little bit, and we wish we had a lot. And I've been like that. And I said, well, if I had a lot of money, I would know what to do. Like if I could just win the lottery, I would all of a sudden I would be like a great money manager, and God and everyone else would say, oh, it's so great. We gave this guy money to manage. And instead, with the little bit I had, I got into debt and I misused it and I spent it on ice creams and cheeseburgers. For me, so my health was bad and I wasn't helping others. And I said, you know what? What makes me think that all of a sudden, if I had a lot of money, I would know what to do with it? It's an interesting thing. What would we do with it? And so giving is an important part, but a lot of people, I find, wish that they could give more than they do. And say, I'd like to be able to help there. I'd like to be able to contribute. I wish I could do something for that situation. Paying taxes. Ron Blue says, you know what? When you pay taxes and you're like, it just sent me this, bill again. Every year it goes up. I mean, these guys are a bunch of thieves, and I don't want to pay it. And he said, you know what? Generally, most of your taxes are based on money you made or money you're spending or things that you have. And he said, you know what? Taxes, people have said it's pretty inevitable in life. When you pay your taxes, say, you know what? Be grateful that you have stuff. That's why they charge you taxes. So if your house bill is big, well, you have a house. If you're paying a bunch of taxes at the grocery store, well, you're buying a bunch of food. And so, taxes is a thing that people say, well, I'm trying to get around it. I'm trying to do this. Well, I'm not going to get into all of that. But when you pay the taxes you have to pay, then Ron Blue says, and I agree, just flip it around and say, you know what, I'm grateful that I have stuff, and that's why they're charging me taxes. Okay, so have some gratitude, and just give yourself some inner peace. So then the other kind of debt is debts there that we need to be eliminating debts. And you say, I have loans. And sometimes people that are great with business and investments then understand how to use debt as a vehicle to grow their money. And so they want to put that in the growth category. And that's fine. Lots of people don't have that knowledge and that skill and that capacity. And so borrowing money then becomes an idea that we're going to do something, but actually we just got ourselves into more debt. And so the easiest, I said at the beginning, we live, but we don't give. And we owe, but we don't grow. If you want your growing to be bigger, or your living to be better, or your giving to increase, the main thing is get rid of your debts. And the taxes keep coming, so you can eliminate the other portion of debts. Keep making that debt pie smaller and smaller, and then you have something to put in the other spaces. And growing is towards financial maturity. Growing is being able to project and have a plan, and we'll look at that. Growing is being able to look ahead to tomorrow, next week, next year, the future, and say, I'm moving so that I'm going to be able to look ahead, and when that day comes, be able to, fix the roof of my house or replace the car or whatever it is that you need to do. And so money's a tool, and we need to have open hands because I'll just give you an example. It's kind of I think Uruguay must be the only country in the world that has a grasera. I don't even know how to say that in English, but like a little trap hidden somewhere in your house that catches the grease and nasty stuff that goes down your kitchen sink, and it sits there, and instead of just going on through, when all of a sudden you get the bad smell, or you get some roaches running through, or you get like something's not right here, ask somebody, is there a grasera? Where is that? And you go and you find this thing, and it's kind of disgusting, and the grease has congealed, and it's blocking the pipes. And so somebody's got to get in there and clean it out. And you know what? As disgusting as it is, when we live by our own ego and our own pride and our own certainty of how we should manage our money, it's like the grasera that's just all blocked up. And God is like, you know what? I'm trying to give you stuff and bring people along your pathway and put you in situations where you can make a difference. You could be a light, like the song we were singing, and let the light shine, or let a good attitude go through you, or a smile, and you don't even have peace and joy, and so you're like all congealed in there, and the pipes are blocked, and God just wants to let his love and his gifts and his things just flow through, and be hospitable and be open. And so open your hands, pay your taxes with gratitude, get rid of the debts, start making the plan, and move towards financial maturity. So it's easy. Today at lunch, you can sit down and you can say, hey, you don't have to remember all the things. You just remember these. Live, give, grow. There is nothing else. And all of the money that you have in your life right now goes in one of those categories. And if it's all in live, then you'll have like live, and you figure it out and write it down in there. And you'll be taking a big step towards financial health. If you ever went on a diet and they started off telling you, the first thing we want you to do is spend a month and write down everything you eat. And I don't know very many people who actually do that, but they suggest it, and probably some of you have, or you write down. Money's like the same way. Well, where do you spend your money? I have no idea. Well, just write it down. Keep your receipts or write it down, and then start putting it in those things. So, great. So there's one perspective. This is what we looked at last week, and that was your heart. So the one perspective, and I said there's 4 things, and from Ron Blue: stewardship, contentment, faith, and wisdom. And when you look at those things, you would ask yourself the question about stewardship. Do I really believe God owns it all? And I came back to the heart thing because I talked about when the grasera is full of junk. And so maybe if the whole budgeting thing is causing you a lot of stress and anxiety, maybe come back to this heart thing and say, you know what? Which of these areas is affecting me? Do I really believe that God owns it all? Contentment. Do I really believe that what I have is enough? Or am I just thinking, this isn't possible for me because, I just need more. And if I had a little bit more, like life isn't fair. And Ron Blue says, really the part of the secret is learning to be content because I know who provides it. And manage what I have. And if you begin to manage what you have, we're going to look at the habits, then you'll find that what you have really is enough to get you started and get you moving. Faith. Ask yourself, how do I demonstrate my faith in the way that I manage my finances? And wisdom. Do I really believe that God can guide me? Like the friend that wrote me and said, I'm thinking about leaving my career because I just see these needs and I feel like I could make a difference, and I'm wondering if God will guide me. Do I really believe that God can guide me down the path and into the future? Because the future is a scary thing. And so here are the 5 habits. I'll just give you it's great if you can memorize that, but you don't have to memorize the 4 in the heart, because I know it's too much information for you to go home at lunch and say, there's only 4 things I can do with money. Live, give, grow. And I want you to know these habits. Okay, that's my second goal. Live, give, grow, and the 5 principles. And this is drawn, if you're just listening, you can't see our great diagram here that somebody made for me. But we put the 5 principles, and it's a square, and it's puzzle piece, and the middle puzzle piece, the middle one is because it's the main one. Spend less than you earn. And that's the first habit, and if you can't do that habit, nothing else will work. Really, nothing else will work if you're spending more than is incoming. It's not going to work. Now, somebody may be a financial genius, and they got a trick, and they'll show you how it's working for them. And so I say, let's wait 5 or 6 years or 10 years, and let's see how that worked out. But basically, the only way forward is to start spending less than you earn. And so you have to know how much you're earning. How much money is coming in? And that's where that circle, that pie comes in. How much is coming in, and how much are they taking from me automatically? And the debts that I owe, and you realize, man, my living piece maybe it's really small. But that's what you have to live. Those are choices. That's where you are. That's your situation. So how can you make that grow? And you can get a better job and all those kinds of things, but sometimes that's not inside your control. You can't just go, okay, Monday I'm going to start a new job. Monday my investment's going to work. Monday, you can't control that. So you start where you are, you spend less than you earn, and then you just follow these principles in order. Avoid the use of debt. And if you're making some notes, I'm going to give you a couple of Bible verses that are great. In fact, let's look them up and read that. I'd like to have somebody look it up in English and somebody to look it up in Spanish. These are Proverbs. And so spend less than you earn. Somebody look up Proverbs 13:7. Proverbs 13:7 in English and then Spanish. And keep your Bible open to Proverbs. We'll do most of these from Proverbs. They'll keep it easy. Have you got it, David? All right. That's it. What a fascinating. One man pretends to be rich and he has nothing. And one man pretends to be poor, but he has great wealth. And so appearances can be deceiving. And so don't be taken in by greed or envy or looking at your neighbor and thinking, wow, how can he afford that car? I want to have a car like that. And so don't be tricked by that. I don't know about Uruguay, but I know in America, there are a lot of people that look like they're doing great. But the truth is they owe so much money. They owe more money than they can make in 2 or 3 years to banks and to creditors. And so there's a lot of pressure on you when you owe a lot of money. And there's people, and you're like, man, that poor guy, he's just struggling through life. And it turns out they're just living with less. And maybe they've got money in the bank, and maybe they don't have money in the bank, but they have peace. Because they're not under the pressure of debt. So can somebody just read that verse in Spanish? Did somebody look it up? Okay. That looks like a no. So, there you go. Thank you. Avoid the use of debt, Proverbs 22:7. Avoid the use of debt, Proverbs 22:7. Boy, there's a tricky system in Uruguay. And if you manage it well, it must be great. Makes me nervous when they say, how many quotas? How many, like you're going to buy something, and they say, you just pay this out over the next 6 months. And you're like, oh, that's great. I can make that little payment over 6 months. And then you do that with about 3 different vendors, and that one little payment, all of a sudden is a bunch of payments, and you didn't realize, and you forgot. And it's like the credit card companies. Say, just buy it on credit. And you say, I think I can pay this by the end of the month. If you cannot pay your credit card by the end of the month, you have become a slave to the lender, to the bank. And it's really hard to get out of there. And so avoiding the use of debt means don't use your credit card if you can't pay it off in cash by the end of the month. Because the interest will kill you, and you're better off to say, I just don't need that. I don't need the food. I don't need the stuff. I don't need that. You'll lose your peace. You'll lose a lot. and you're just betting on the future being able to pay it back. And so if you have made those decisions, just start figuring out how to get out. I don't know if we all have. I've certainly made lots of bad choices. It's easy to make a bad choice to get in a difficult situation, but you got to start getting out. So you have the verse now, Proverbs 22:7. Darren.
The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower servant to the lender.
The borrower is servant to the lender. You're under the debt of the credit card is the one we all know. Man, and they're charging you 18, 22% or whatever it is that they charge you. That just means you just can't come back from that. And if you have any doubts, ask somebody who's been there and they'll tell you. You got to get out. Somebody in Spanish, Proverbs 22:7. Okay. So that's a challenge. The next one is plan for financial margin. And an easy way to say that is save. Plan for financial margin. We'll focus on that next week to give you some great practical steps. But have a plan. How am I going to change? Okay, so I made my pie, and it doesn't look good to me right now. But I want my pie, that circle, to look good, and maybe it'll take me 6 months, or maybe it'll take me a year, but you start making a plan how I'm going to get there, planning for financial margin. And Proverbs 13:11. Someone in English and then someone else in Spanish. Juliana? Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears, but gathered little by little, it adds up. Someone in Spanish? Okay, that's what I thought. If I just win the lottery, I'll be the most generous guy in the world, and I'll do other things. And so who doesn't have the dream of winning the lottery? But the proverb says, if you add it up little by little, just make it a little bit of time, over time it'll grow. And that's an interesting principle of life. And you know what? Here's a good thing you can do. Take these Proverbs 13:11. You say, I want to remember that. Or Proverbs 13:7, and use it for your passwords. You're supposed to have like millions of passwords. The hackers never know the Bible verses, so... write it with a capital P or write it in Spanish or English and write it in Telugu, David, and, they'll never break in. And every time you go there, you'll remember, Proverbs 13:11. He who gathers money little by little watches it grow. So then set goals. These habits are also all things you could do this afternoon. You could do this evening. You could say, really? Am I spending less than I'm earning? How much am I earning? How much is coming in on the average per month and how much is going out? And where do we have debts? Do we have a plan to change it? And do we have some goals down the road, like 3 years, 5 years, 20 years from now, something we'd like to do? And so set some goals. And Philippians 3:12. Now I have to go to the New Testament. But keep your finger in Proverbs. We'll come back to Proverbs for the last one. Philippians 3:12. Somebody who didn't read yet. Jackie? Okay, so Paul is writing. He says, not saying I've achieved all these things, but I'm pressing on towards the goal to do greater things, whatever God created for me. And so just trying to be yourself. You don't have to be somebody else. People say, I'd love to be Bill Gates. So then I watched something about Bill Gates, and he reads like whatever they said, a book a day. How many pages an hour does Bill Gates read? Somebody see that? Oh, Lisa left me. Where is she? Yeah, like over 100 pages, it's like 2 pages a minute. It's like, and he's not reading easy stuff. It's not like some novel about baseball. It's like this world problems, and he's reading through it. And so you don't have to be Bill Gates. You don't have to be anybody else. You just have to be you. And that's trusting God's wisdom, that he'll just put you where you need to be, with the people he wants you to be with, and with the resources you need. And so that's one reason we can be content, because I don't need to have Bill Gates' money solving the world's problems or spending or whatever he does. I just need to be me in the life, living the life that I have. And that's where the peace and contentment. Remember we said last week, if you could experience peace, you'd be happy. You don't need money to have peace. If you have a lot of debts and stress about finance, then you don't have peace. So the last one is give generously. Proverbs 22:9. So a generous man, or it could be a woman, a generous person will himself be blessed. And the blessing may not be money. We put generosity as the fifth habit and not the first. Why? Because so many people in churches and religious organizations, and maybe in others, get-rich-quick schemes, are like they want you to give first, so then you can get the blessing. I want to tell you, there's no guarantees that if you give, then you're good. If you give thinking, I'll give this and then God will give me more, it doesn't work like that. You can't expect God to do something for you. That would be like you controlling God. Then he wouldn't be God. And so you see how that's like a self-serving thing. So when the pastor gets up and he says, just give so that then you'll be blessed and give us more. Whoa. So go back. I guess that means we're done. Time's up. Maxime, you're everybody's hero. But if you're in debt, there are people literally, and they're in so much debt, they take the little bit they have and they give it away so that God will bless them so they can get out of debt. And I want to tell you, that's not wisdom. That's not wise. So spend less than you earn, get out of debt, make your plans, set your goals, and begin to give. And so these habits will work for everyone, everywhere. And next week, we're going to talk about how to build margin. So there's 4 things that you can do with money. Give, live, owe, and grow. And there's 5 habits. You spend less than you earn. You avoid debt. You make a plan. Save. You can call it savings. So spend less than you earn. Avoid debt. Save. Set some goals. And give. Generously. And you're going to see the stress slip away, the peace and joy return, and your plan is going to be a great one. So I hope that's super practical. There are a lot of great Bible verses. The last one you can look up and memorize is Hebrews 13:5. And so we can read that to finish. Maybe somebody can read that in English and then in Spanish. And with that, we'll be done. Hebrews 13:5. Maxime, man, doing a great job. You always want somebody at the PowerPoint that tells the speaker, time's up. Move on. Natalie, Hebrews 13:5.
Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.
Thank you. In Spanish? Okay. It's okay. Just speak up.
Sean vuestros costumbres sin avaricia, contentos con lo que tenéis ahora. Porque dijo, no te desampararé ni te dejaré.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I pray that this practical message could be inspiring to us to take another look individually or with our family or with somebody else at our finances. Not so that we can not be afraid, so that we don't have to be ashamed, we don't have to be greedy, but we can know what our real situation is and make plans to move forward. Lord, so that we can experience your freedom and joy and the peace of trusting that you give us what we need and that you'll show us the best way to administer the resources we have. So guide each one, Lord. And now we pray the prayer of Paul for his people. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.